Civil restraints is a settlement agreement where we are able to resolve a restraining order without a final restraining order ending up on your record. Okay? So a temporary restraining order is issued. The plaintiff files against the defendant. It gets listed for a final restraining order hearing, usually within 10 days. The plaintiff essentially has three options. They can dismiss the restraining order outright without any agreement, or they can enter into a civil restraints agreement, number 2, or they can proceed with a final restraining order. That means they want the trial and they want to try to get a permanent restraining order against the defendant. Option number 2, civil restraints, means that they will dismiss the restraining order. They have to speak to the domestic violence advocates at the court to confirm that they are doing so freely and voluntarily. They've been explained the cycle of domestic violence and they want to dismiss the order against the defendant. To replace the restraining order that was in place, the temporary order, instead we will enter into a civil restraints agreement. This is a contract between the plaintiff and the defendant which details how they are going to deal with each other moving forward, if at all. Okay? Some agreements say no contact at all, everything is settled and done between the parties, and there should be no contact. Email, phone, in person, don't show up at my house, don't show up at my work, etc., etc. There are other agreements which say, okay, we're not going to deal with each other at all in person moving forward, but we have a child in common. We're going to email about the child. We'll do pick up and drop off at the curb at our house or at the police station, and otherwise we're not dealing with each other. It can also address issues like child support, alimony, etc., temporarily, and division of property. Who's going to get the house? Who's going to stay in the apartment? Who's getting the couch? Who's getting the dog, etc., etc. All of these issues can be resolved in the civil restraints agreement. If there is a child in common or a pending divorce, this civil restraints agreement can be docketed with the court. It's actually a formal agreement that gets entered with the court. However, if there is no child in common and there is not a divorce pending between the parties, then it is essentially just a contract between the parties. Both parties sign and nothing is entered with the court. However, for a plaintiff, this is good. It guarantees them some protection. It has it in writing, signed by the defendant, that this is how they're going to deal with each other moving forward. If the defendant turns around and starts harassing the plaintiff again, they can always file a new restraining order and point to the agreement and say, look, I gave this person a chance. I told them I wanted to be left alone, and they're continuing to harass me. In that case, there's a very good chance the next time they will get a final restraining order. From a defendant's perspective, a civil restraints agreement is great because the restraining order is dismissed. So the serious things that come along with a restraining order, such as fingerprints, statewide database for domestic violence offenders, prohibited from owning or possessing firearms, none of those consequences come along with a civil restraints agreement. So that's why a civil restraints agreement is always good for a defendant if a plaintiff is willing to consider negotiating a deal with us. If you need assistance with a restraining order matter in New Jersey and drafting and working on a civil restraints agreement on your case, contact my office anytime. We always provide free consultations.